Welcome to the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report for Friday, October 23rd. This is the final Ian Cameron Sports Report show of the week. And because it's a Friday and it's football season, it means Friday football six-pack. And I like a good six-pack. I've got a good six-pack lined up for us on today's show. 6 football games that I'll be breaking down right here on today's show from a betting perspective. 3 college football games, Alabama, Tennessee, Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan, Minnesota. Those are the 3 games in the college ranks on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we'll break down Green Bay, Houston, San Francisco, New England, and the Sunday nighter, the game that's been flexed into Sunday night football earlier this week, Seattle and Arizona in an NFC West rivalry battle. Those will be the 6 games making up today's Friday football six-pack. Here on the Ian Cameron Sports Report for Friday, October 23rd. We're missing our ticker here, and I'm just discovering that now. We're going to change that. There we go. Ticker on the screen. Let's rock. All right, let's look back on last night. We had just the NFL and the college game last night. Arkansas State. See, this is me with the bat in my hand. This is me at the plate. This is me swinging and missing and striking out when it comes to Arkansas State in the first half last night against App State. You know, thinking maybe Appalachian State off the layoff, hadn't played in almost a month, might come out a little bit sluggish, may not be playing all that great, may not be all that sharp. Well, they were sharp. Either that or the Arkansas State defense was just as bad as they've been all year. And firing the defensive coordinator clearly did not make much of an impact on this Arkansas State defense. Still can't stop anybody. But nevertheless, Appalachian State, an impressive, dominant win. They roll to an easy win. Rewarding their backers. Doesn't matter what number you got. Appalachian State took a ton of money. They opened 10-point favorites in that game last night, and they closed about 2 touchdown favorites. They got the money, and the game stays under the total. The over take just a ton of money, 63 all the way up to 69, and the game ends up staying under the total last night, UL Lafayette and App State. In the NFL, it was the Giants and the Eagles, and it was 2 teams that, well, they played a game like 2 bad teams would, that you would expect 2 bad teams would. Both teams didn't want to win that game. It's like, here's the game. You can take it. First, it was the Eagles most of the game with turnovers and mistakes in the red zone and penalties and sloppy play, defensive breakdowns, one of which, of course, being the big 80-yard run by Daniel Jones, and it looks like it's a walk-in touchdown for him. And all of a sudden, he's running full steam, and he ends up tripping, losing his balance and falling down all by himself with no one around him inside the 10-yard line. Obviously, that got a lot of attention everywhere following that moment. Everybody having a good laugh at the expense of Daniel Jones last night, who tripped over his own 2 feet on his way to the end zone. A drive that you thought was going to put the Giants in a very good position, and you thought maybe New York, after the touchdown they got in the fourth quarter to go up 2 scores, had finally put the game away. But when you're a bad team, you are never comfortable when you have a lead. And the New York Giants proved that. They were just way too soft on defensive coverage when the Eagles got the ball back down double digits in the fourth. Carson Wentz went right down the field, a touchdown to Greg Ward, closed the gap to a 1-score game. Sure enough, the Giants can't get a couple of first downs or enough first downs to run out the clock. They eventually have to punt the ball back to the Eagles. And give Carson Wentz credit. He had a game full of mistakes, and he was aggravating. He was frustrating if you're an Eagles fan or an Eagles backer last night in that game. But when push came to shove, game on the line, there's Carson Wentz somehow, some way standing in there, making the plays when they had to be made. And sure enough, they get the touchdown. Wentz to Boston Scott, who had a good game. Richard Rodgers, boy, certainly had a good read with Richard Rodgers last night. I said on the show yesterday, and also the Football Frenzy show right here at Pub Sports Radio yesterday, that Richard Rodgers against the Giants, he'd be targeted. He'd probably get more than 3.5 receptions, get a bunch of yards, and he easily crushed his receiving yards and receptions prop. Giants vulnerable against tight ends. They were again last night. So that came in. A lot of the props were really good to me last night. It was a good night betting the props. It's a good thing I stayed with props and not the game, because I was leaning to the Eagles minus the points. Sure enough, the Giants get the wire-to-wire point spread cover. Even though they lose the game at the end, really there was not much doubt that the New York Giants were the correct side in terms of the ATS point spread result. They covered wire to wire pretty much last night, other than Philadelphia getting the first touchdown of the game. But after that, the Giants answered right back, and then they were covering for pretty much the rest of the game. So if you had the New York Giants, you had the right side. How incredible is it that and this is 2020, betting unders across all sports. This game is prototypical of it. What you expect now when you bet unders here in the year 2020. You got to sweat right to the end. You could have what looks like a clear sailing, stone cold under, and then all of a sudden, fourth quarter shenanigans arise, and you're stuck there sweating and biting your fingernails late. And underbettors were doing just that at the end of that game last night. But if you had the under, clearly you had a good bet. That would have been a horrendous betting loss if you had the under last night and ended up losing that game. But the game just barely stays under the total. But you had the right side. You had the right idea all along in that game last night. That game never really got close to going over the total until the frantic, and I mean frantic, last 5 or 6 minutes of that fourth quarter, when you had the Giant touchdown and you had the two Eagles touchdowns to get that game right close to the number. But the game just barely stays under the total. All right, let's go to our previews now. We're going to start previewing World Series Game 3 tonight, Rays and Dodgers. Let's start there. What a pitching matchup tonight. It's Walker Buehler taking on Charlie Morton for the Rays. Should be a great matchup tonight in terms of the pitching. Current line has the Dodgers, as you would expect, as they will be for this whole series, in that moderate favorite range, minus 145 to minus 150 as chalk, total 7.5. This game to me is one of those games where I decided, you know what, I really like Tampa Bay in game 2, and it was an official play for me, which I sent out to email subscribers. Tonight, I'm probably going to sprinkle a few bucks on Tampa Bay, but nothing more than that. This to me has a coin flip result written all over it. And if you're going to give me plus 135 or so, plus 130 to plus 135 with the coin flip type of game, you got to take it. Charlie Morton's been brilliant in these playoffs. I mean, I don't know how else you can say it when it comes to how good he's been. Now there's the moniker, remember James Shields for many years in the playoffs. People were calling him Big Game James Shields. Well, now Charlie Morton is starting to garner big game nickname thrown his way, and why not? He's been great. 0.57 ERA in his three postseason starts. Remember, he faced the Dodgers back in the 2017 World Series as a member of the Astros, the cheating Astros at the time, and Morton flat out dominated the Dodgers in that series. So he's fared well against this Dodgers team. I think he's probably going to have a good chance to neutralize this Dodgers lineup. I'm very impressed with the way he's pitched. What can you say about the way he pitched in Game 7 against his former Astros team in the ALCS just a few days ago to close out that series? He was everything you could have wanted, everything Kevin Cash could have wanted. So Morton's a bet-on pitcher. Why am I not in love with Tampa Bay tonight? Because Walker Buehler's not a guy I'm in a rush to bet against. Buehler's been good. I know he had the blister issues most of the season, but I think those issues are starting to disappear a little bit. I think he's feeling a little bit more comfortable. He's gotten better. I mean, with each playoff start that he's made, I think he's looked more comfortable. He's allowed just more than one earned run in just one game out of his 4 playoff starts. And really, since the early part of the wild card round, he has been outstanding. 1.89 ERA, opponents batting just 208 against him. And here's the issue now for Tampa Bay. Buehler's proven to be a strikeout machine. He's racked up the Ks. He's got 29 strikeouts in the 19 innings pitched here in the playoffs. And the Rays have really been striking out a lot. That's been the one issue for them. And it's kind of surprising. For years, the Rays have been one of the shining examples of a team that's patient at the plate, works the count, takes walks. They've kind of lost that identity a little bit this year. They're striking out more. They're more of a feast or famine, home run ball, or you strike out. I mean, look at even the last game they won. The home run ball carried them. Brandon Lau finally got going, which is good. But again, it's the home runs that have really carried Tampa Bay here in these playoffs. So they've become more of a feast or famine, power or punch out type of team. Either they hit the home run or they strike out. And Bueller's got that capability to make this a free swinging lineup, which the Rays have been, taking on more of a free swinging type lineup this year. He's got the ability to make them miss. And that's definitely something that sticks with me in the back of my mind. A team that relies on the home run ball can get shut down by a pitcher in the form that Walker Buehler's in right now. So that's why it's tough for me. I mean, Buehler's been every bit as good lately as Morton. To me, first 5 under makes a lot of sense here. But again, you're not getting a great value. And I'm even, very, very, because both teams can hit home runs on a nightly basis. All it takes is one blast or with a guy or two on base, and you're in jeopardy, in peril all of a sudden with a first 5 under. And with the Dodgers lineup, it's still a little bit scary with betting unders, not to mention the over is 2-0 in this series. First 2 games have gone over the total. So the starting pitching matchup dictates we could see a low-scoring start to this game. This is why I lean to the first 5 under tonight, but it's not a strong opinion. It's not something I have a great deal of interest betting or excitement betting because of just, the high-scoring nature of the first 2 games of this series. More than anything, I will probably look a small play to me on Tampa Bay, just at the plus price. The good news for the Rays is that all their key relievers worked in game 2 on Wednesday, but the day off comes in handy. They should have all of their top relievers on tap. And if this game's close late, the Rays bullpen give them a little bit of an edge over the Dodgers pen. But I don't love Tampa Bay tonight the way I did game 2 on Wednesday. I thought that was a great spot for them with Blake Snell, with a rested pen. A better pitching edge with Snell over Gonsolin in that game. There's not that edge here in this one. So it's a smaller lean to Tampa Bay at the plus price, but just a small entertainment-sized bet, I guess you could say, for me here in Game 3 of the MLB World Series. All right, let's turn now to the Friday football six-pack. 3 college games, 3 NFL games this Sunday before we wrap up the week here on the Ian Cameron Sports Report. I'll start with Alabama, Tennessee. We've got Alabama here, more than 3 touchdown favorites in this game, but minus 21.5 to even minus 22. And this opened minus 19.5 on Alabama. Total 66. It's gone up from 62. Look, if you've been betting Alabama over every game this season, you've cashed a ticket every time. I mean, they have been perfect to the over this year. Why not? They had the defense that was struggling early on. The offense is incredibly potent. Mac Jones has done an outstanding job leading this offense. They've got an incredible amount of skill position talent. Devontae Smith leading a great receiving core. Najee Harris in the backfield. Just a dynamic, explosive team. They've got a good offensive line, and they can just come at you with quick strike scores. And Georgia even found that out last week against Alabama. And Georgia's defense is elite. And Alabama was still able to get those quick strike touchdowns against them. They're just an absolute machine, this Crimson Tide team on the offensive side of the football. Their defense started out the season struggling. They gave up points to A&M. They got shredded by Ole Miss. Concerns. They fired the defensive coordinator, Nick Saban did, and named Charlie Strong the new DC. And after a shaky first half against Georgia, boy, that defense looked a lot better in the second half. In fact, pitching a shutout over Georgia in the second half of that game last week, that's good news. And it makes me think this defense, maybe they can salvage something. And let's be honest, even though the defense got ripped apart, earlier in the season for Alabama, there's still a great deal of talent. They still recruit, the best of the best 4-star, 5-star talent on that side of the ball. You would have to think that this defense would get better as the season goes on. Maybe we're seeing evidence of that with the way they played in the second half last week against Georgia. And if they can frustrate Georgia's offense, what could they do to Tennessee here? And a quarterback that has just shattered confidence right now. Jared Guarantano, he's been there forever and just doesn't seem to be getting any better. In fact, he might even be getting worse. That was a debacle for Guarantano and the Vols last week on offense. 2 pick sixes thrown by him in the first half against Kentucky. As soon as that happened, it was pretty much game over. Kentucky ruled from that point on. You got to be worried about what you're seeing offensively. And now Jeremy Pruitt is, apparently critical of his coaching staff again. And there's question marks that Guarantano is going to be on a short leash here. The Tennessee defense we saw last week against Kentucky in the trenches, they got mauled. Kentucky just kind of ran the ball down their throat and they got tired. And boy, this Tennessee defense, you're getting tired against Kentucky and getting owned in the trenches by them. That's trouble, I think, for me against Alabama. The one issue here that you got to keep in mind is maybe it's a potential, hangover for Alabama after a huge win against Georgia, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. And even if there is a hangover, is Tennessee right now good enough to take advantage of that? I'm not sure. I actually took Alabama first half, minus 12.5 is the current number with that. I got 11.5 with it. I think that's probably a good way to look. I mean, I don't think there's going to be that much of a hangover. And Tennessee, with Jarrett Guarantano still making mistakes, if he turns the ball over and gives Alabama short fields, Alabama's going to turn this thing into a romp in a hurry. And I worry that could happen here for Tennessee, a team that, let's be honest, in the second half against Georgia, once Georgia figured it out, they were destroyed Tennessee in that second half against Georgia. And now you're playing an Alabama team that just beat Georgia. That's trouble to me. I think laying the double digits in the first half with Alabama is a decent way to go here in this matchup. We've got Nebraska, Ohio State as the Big Ten season gets underway. Cornhuskers and the Buckeyes. You've got Ohio State 27-point favorites here, 67.5, 68 the total in this game. This should be two teams chomping at the bit to play a game, because when it comes to the Big Ten and all the fury and all the rage about the Big Ten not potentially having a season, Nebraska and Ohio State were two of the teams right at the top of the list in terms of teams that were furious that the Big Ten might cancel the season. Nebraska wasn't happy about it. Ohio State wasn't happy about it. And now here they are getting to play each other to begin the Big Ten season for both teams. Ohio State should have one of the best offenses in the country, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Justin Fields, the dual threat, is back again. He's got most of his starting offensive line back, an incredible amount of career starts back on that Buckeyes offensive line, most of his top wide receivers back. Okay, you lose J.K. Dobbins, but his replacement this year has looked good in the practice leading up to this game, and there shouldn't be much of a drop-off because of the fact that the offensive line is so strong, should be able to open up holes for the ground game. Nebraska's defense on the D-line loses some personnel from last year, and it's a Nebraska defense that quite honestly wasn't all that good anyway last year, and they've got some starters to replace really on all three levels going into this season. Scott Frost, again, this team's not really been good defensively under him. Ohio State, they've scored average 42 points per game in the last two meetings against Nebraska. They've had no problem just absolutely carving up this Cornhuskers defense. And I don't see what changes here. Like, Nebraska has not been able to match up with their defense against Ohio State's offense. I don't see what's going to change here. However, on the flip side of this matchup is Nebraska. Their offense with Taylor Martinez back. Look, he's been very, very inconsistent. We know that. Maybe this is a guy that's never going to get better, like Jarrett Guarantano, who we just talked about with Tennessee. Maybe Taylor Martinez not going to get any better either at quarterback for Nebraska, which is why he was really pushed hard in practices for Nebraska leading up to the start of the season for the starting job. And in fact, he barely won the starting job by the skin of his teeth, but there was a very big quarterback competition going on in Lincoln between Taylor Martinez and the guy that he was battling for the quarterback spot with, Luke McCaffrey. So all of a sudden, pressure's on Martinez here. We'll see if he is able to show that he's earned and deserving of the starting job. There's a lot to like, though, about Nebraska. The offensive line brings back much of its production from last year. The running back, Dedrick Mills was a really good running back for them last year. Is back again as the starting running back this year. Should be really good for the Cornhuskers running the football. Depth at wide receiver is a concern. A couple of those receivers were banged up a little bit coming into the week. Last check, one of them should play, the other not so much, but they should still be able to make plays in the passing game against Ohio State, which is the biggest concern for Ohio State coming into the season. It's their defense. It was a great defense last year. You only have 3 starters back on that side of the ball this year. The defensive line took a hit. The linebacking core took a hit. And the secondary took a big hit. Thank goodness for them. Sean Wade, who's been considered one of the better DBs in college football, he did decide to opt in. He initially said, I'm not going to play this season because of COVID-19, but he decided he's going to come back instead and changed his mind, and now he is going to play. So that's going to help a little bit, but I think Nebraska should be able to put up points. We know they're going to run fast-paced, up-tempo offense, which has been the Scott Frost way here at Nebraska, and of course going back to when he was at Central Florida, one of the faster-paced offenses in college football. They should score points. I think Nebraska is going to get 40s, if not maybe even 50 in this game, and with such anticipation and expectations for Ohio State, they feel this could be not only a college football playoff season, but maybe a national title season for them. They might look for style points here in a game like this. And I know there's some people that think they got Penn State next week. Maybe they're going to be a little bit conservative, hold some things back. I don't believe it for a second. This is first home game of the season, first game of the season for a team that's excited to finally be playing here. I think they're going to show everything they've got here in this game and not hold anything back. So I think Ohio State, I don't know if I want to lay 26, but maybe you look at them in the first half. I also think this game can get up and over the total. It's 67.5, 68 right now. I think Ohio State's good for high 40s, if not 50, and then you can get 21 out of Nebraska. And if that's the case, the game can get up and over the total here. Next game, third and final game on the college football portion of the Friday Football Six-Pack. It's another Big Ten game, Michigan, Minnesota. Michigan, about a 3-point favorite here in Minnesota. The total around 53.5 for this game. I would love to be on Minnesota. In fact, that's the side I'm looking at here in this game. I don't want Michigan. I do not want the Wolverines here. I don't want to lay 3 on the road with them. They've been a bad point spread team on the road under Jim Harbaugh, especially in the favorites role. We know against the better teams in the Big Ten and the better teams in college football, Minnesota's got a top 25 team coming into this season. They've struggled, step up in class against those teams. Not only that, but Shea Patterson gone, new starting quarterback here for the Michigan Wolverines. Let's see if he's going to be ready to step up to the plate and play well at the quarterback spot for Michigan. And this is a Michigan team that offensively, they're not very inventive. They're not very creative. They say they want to be a little bit more explosive, and then Jim Harbaugh pulls the reins in. It goes back to 80s football, pound the football, run the football on first down, second down. And that's always been his problem. Last year that was supposed to be an explosive, be a lot more potent, a lot more vertical passing game. And we just didn't see that enough. Is now that going to change with Joe Milton now becoming the new starting quarterback here for the Michigan Wolverines? That remains to be seen here. There's a lot of hype around him. They say he's a good athlete. He's got a decent arm. But again, it's the first game of the season. Let's see how he does. It's no given that he's going to be able to just light it up right away here on the road against a very good Minnesota team. There's a lot to like about Minnesota. Definitely, they bring back Tanner Morgan, who's a very capable quarterback, which is a good sign for them. They've got a very good offensive line coming into this season. Minnesota, the receiving core looks solid, running backs as well. Defense, they lose a couple key cogs along the defensive line. They lose, of course, Antoine Winfield Jr., who was so good in that secondary last year for the Golden Gophers as well. The thing I'm hesitating about here with taking Minnesota, because I think they could not only keep this to a 3-point game, but win outright, is PJ Fleck with these ominous messages during the week saying, we've got some players that have battled COVID-19 in recent weeks, and we're not entirely sure we'll have everyone, at the ready and everyone available to us for this game on Saturday night. And right away, that's when I said, okay, I'm putting my hands up. I'm not betting this until I know exactly which players PJ Fleck is referring to. We have no idea if these starters that may miss this game or sit out due to the COVID-19 issues, are they starters? Are they backups? Are they third stringers? We don't know. What side of the ball is it? Because that could impact things. If it's on the offensive side of the football, which is probably their strength, that could be a greater concern for Minnesota going into this game. So who exactly is dealing with these issues and who exactly is going to be sitting out of this game? I've got to know that before I pull the trigger here on Minnesota. All of that being said, if I'm betting this game from a side perspective, and again, it's pending this news on who exactly may not play here for the Golden Gophers on Saturday night, it's going to be Minnesota for me plus the points. All right, NFL. 3 games in the NFL. We'll start with Green Bay and Houston. Packers and Texans. Packers 3.5-point road favorites in Houston, H-Town. The total 57 in this game. I lean to Green Bay here a little bit, but more than anything, even with this total at 57, which is really, really high, I think you can go ahead still with over the total in this game. I really do. This Houston defense just atrocious last week against Tennessee, and Tennessee's got a really good offense. I think we're finding that out now. But the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers and company, off a really poor performance, their worst of the season, their first loss of the year against the Bucs. Their offensive line struggled to block Tampa Bay throughout that game. Houston doesn't have any pass rush. They can't stop the run. This should be a game where, and even if David Bakhtiari, who's a big injury on that offensive line for the Packers, even if he doesn't play in this game, this should be an easier matchup for that O-line. They should have a better job getting Aaron Jones going, running the football. They should be able to do a better job in pass protection for Aaron Rodgers, because there's not a whole lot of resistance going on with Houston from the defensive end side of the football right now. But Deshaun Watson and company are moving the ball offensively, and I'm still not sold on the Packers defense. And we saw the Green Bay defense a little bit finally have a little bit of an up and inconsistent game. They did play good defense earlier in the season, but they faced a lot of weaker teams and weaker offenses. I think Deshaun Watson and at home with that receiving core, they can do damage here against the Green Bay secondary. I do think this game, again, 31-28, that's a final score that certainly seems within the realm of possibility for me in this game. So I do like the over, and I lean to Green Bay. But I only lean to Green Bay because I'm higher on Houston than a lot of people are, and it's because I think the Bill O'Brien firing was a big cleansing for this team. You've seen much greater energy, much greater effort and focus from the Texans in the two games after they got rid of O'Brien. But the issue for Houston is just the devastating, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching loss they had against Tennessee. They had the lead late. Tennessee tied it in the final seconds of the fourth quarter. Tennessee gets the ball to start overtime, and that was all she wrote for the Texans. They end up losing. It was a hard loss. They're 1-5, brutal loss. They're now 1-5. They know that now they're really in tough to make anything of this season, and I worry about that a little bit going into this game. Not to mention Aaron Rodgers, 29-19 ATS off a loss in his career. That's why I think Green Bay is the side for me I would lean toward, but I'd like the total in particular just a little bit more for this matchup with the Packers and Texans. All right, San Francisco, New England. We've seen New England bet down all the way to 1.5, 2-point home favorites. They opened 5.5-point home chalk here in Foxborough, 44.5 the total in this game. New England's got issues. Cam Newton coming off the COVID-19 absence, didn't look right last week. The offensive line injury plagued and in shambles. That's something you've got to be concerned about as well. For the Patriots going into this game, even though San Francisco's defensive line is also significantly depleted when you talk about Dee Ford and Nick Bosa's absence. But San Francisco's defense played better last week against the Rams, and I didn't see them able to run the football. New England last week against Denver, it was just an awful game for their offense. We'll have to wait and see here if New England is able to bounce back. Keep in mind, one of their losses was against Seattle, on a goal line stand by the Seahawks at the end of that game, and another loss against Kansas City. Their defense played well, though, New England. No question about that. Drew Lock and the Broncos, they really couldn't get much going last week at all. Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers, they stopped the bleeding. Back-to-back losses at home as favorites of more than a touchdown against the Eagles and then against the Dolphins. Well, they bounced back with the win against the Rams. Much better performance. San Francisco's offense is getting healthier. That's the good news for them. They got Brandon Ayuk back. Deebo Samuel is back at receiver. They're getting their weapons back. The O-line is getting healthier. The team is finally starting to come out of this just massive abyss of injuries that they've had so far early in the season, which is good news for them moving forward here. But it's not the greatest spot for San Francisco. You're off a big division win. Now you're going to the East Coast to play the Patriots. It's Bill Belichick and the Patriots off a loss. From a spot perspective, it's definitely a New England spot. It's not necessarily a San Francisco 49ers spot, but you're talking about a New England Patriots team here that, they've got offensive line injuries. That's definitely a concern for me going into this game. The fact they couldn't move the ball hardly at all, it worries me. And it worries me, too, that the receiving core has left a lot to be desired. There's not a lot of speed on this team. That's what I'm finding out. Not a lot of these receivers for New England are getting separation are stretching the field for Cam Newton. That's definitely a problem. It's a run-heavy, dink-and-dunk, conservative offense. They're relying on RPO and Cam Newton's legs to be able to help this offense out. It's a really tough game because to me, San Francisco, matchup-wise, matches up pretty well here, but I don't love the spot. And now you've lost so much of this line value. If you got San Fran at 5.5, good. Now that it's 1.5, 2, I mean, New England now less than a field goal at home. You don't see that you haven't seen that very often over the years with Tom Brady, when Tom Brady was here, of course, with Bill Belichick, but now a different era, I guess you could say, for New England. And here they are laying less than a field goal at home. So the line value in the spot is in New England's favor. But to me, this matchup is in San Francisco's favor. So I'm not going to get involved in the side here, but I do agree with the move toward the under. I think it's going to be, I don't think San Francisco is going to go on the road and light it up against New England's defense, which has been their strength early on this season. But on the flip side, I can't see New England with a banged up offensive line and Cam Newton looking shaky in his first game since returning from his COVID-19 experience, not really looking in sync. So the under definitely makes sense here between the Niners and Patriots. Definitely could see a 21-17 or a 23-20 type of game here between these two teams. Sunday Night Football. Now, this was not originally going to be the Sunday Night Football game, but there was concerns that the NFL would have to cancel Tampa Bay, Las Vegas, the originally scheduled Sunday Night Football game due to the Raiders' COVID-19 issues. That's why they made the switch to ensure they got a Sunday Night Football game for the folks at NBC. And this one will definitely not be canceled. Seattle and Arizona, NFC West battle, Sunday Night Football. It is Seattle 3.5-point favorites, 56.5 the total in this game. Seattle Seahawks, of course, entering this game following a bye week, obviously undefeated on the season, and you got to give them a lot of credit for the way they have played so far this season. Seattle finding ways to win. It hasn't been pretty, 5-0 straight up off a bye, but it's been a lot of good fortune as well. 4-0 in games decided by one possession. They've been outgained in each and every game this season. Their defense just hasn't been able to get stops consistently. If Minnesota could pick up 1 yard, against Seattle when going for it on fourth down in that game they had before the bye week, they might have lost that game. They may not have that chance to come back and win, but sure enough, they got the chance. And when you give Russell Wilson a chance to beat you in the final couple minutes of a football game, he's got that chance and ability to do it. There's no question about it. And he's, still got a decent amount of weapons to work with. I mean, it's not maybe one of the better receiving cores that the Seattle Seahawks have had, but he's still been able to make plays in the passing game. We know he's also been a guy that's been capable of, getting out of the pocket when it collapses. A lot of people like Arizona clearly in this game because Seattle opened around a 3.5 to 4-point favorite, and now they're just laying 3. But the injury news coming out of Seattle's practices this week is not good. It was already announced Jamal Adams, who they brought him in to be an impact player in that secondary, and now all of a sudden he's going to miss yet another game, and he's a guy they dearly miss. And they're going to dearly miss him here because Arizona is one of those teams that can throw the football, that has weapons for Kyler Murray, with DeAndre Hopkins, who is apparently expected to play. He's been a little bit banged up this week, DeAndre Hopkins, but they're hoping that he can still play despite that ankle injury that he's dealing with. He's probable right now for this game. And I know Chandler Jones, the absence of him, one of their better pass rushers, it didn't show up against Dallas because Dallas's offensive line was so banged up and injury riddled, and Andy Dalton's like a statue back there. He can't move. This is where it could show up. This is a better Seattle offense, a mobile quarterback, and Russell Wilson. I'm worried that this could be the game where Arizona finally says, you know what, we really do miss Chandler Jones because this isn't Dallas anymore with a banged-up O-line, immobile quarterback, and Andy Dalton. This is a better O-line and a quarterback that can absolutely burn you if you don't get him to the ground. And there could be opportunities for Russell Wilson with his, patented ability to keep plays alive with his feet, and be able to maybe really set up some big passing plays down the field if that Arizona pass rush minus Chandler Jones isn't able to get adequate enough pressure on Russell Wilson going into this game. So from a spot perspective, it's Seattle off a bye and Arizona on a short week. They played Monday night in Dallas, but I also will throw this at you. The angle that I mentioned on the Football Frenzy show on Thursday. When a team is rolling, they're just winning, game in and game out, undefeated going into a bye week. I don't love backing that team in the first game after the bye. The bye week comes at a bad time. It disrupts the rhythm. It disrupts the momentum. And I worry that happens here with Seattle. They're just rolling. They're finding ways to win. They haven't won pretty. They've been outplayed, outgained, as I mentioned, in every game. But the bottom line is their record's 5-0. They found ways to win. And they were in a good rhythm, playing every week. And now you have the bye week. And you got Arizona, a tough divisional game here. We saw what happened to Green Bay, undefeated going into their bye week, and they had a clunker against Tampa Bay coming out of their bye week. I'm not saying Seattle for sure is going to have a clunker, but I've seen now that this happen, and I've been capping and betting NFL football for over a decade now. I can't count how many times I have seen the teams that are rolling going into the bye week, playing their best football, and then after the bye, that first game coming out of the bye, they don't look like the same team. Penalties, turnovers, mistakes, sloppy, just out of sync because their rhythm's been thrown off. They're in great flow, playing every week, winning every week, and then all of a sudden the bye comes in, and then coming out of the bye, you're just out of sync. It happened to Green Bay last week. I'm worried it could happen to Seattle here. And Seattle is still a team that I get a little uncomfortable laying points with them, especially a field goal or more. With their defense just so ravaged and still not very good, knowing Arizona's got potential to make some plays against that defense, although Seattle's certainly offensively probably going to do damage here against Arizona as well in this game. I just don't feel comfortable laying the 3.5 here in this game with Seattle. I've seen this movie play out in the NFL before, where the team coming out of their bye week when they're undefeated, and they just don't look like that same team in the first game, and maybe they get knocked down a peg. So for that reason, I can understand why some people have bet Arizona and the money's come in on them this week. This is another game where it's difficult for me to bet the under. I haven't bet the over yet in this game. I'm hoping it slips below this key number of 56. If it does, I'm definitely going to get more interested in the game going over the total. This should be some advantages for both of these teams on Sunday Night Football. It should be a fun one, and we should see plenty of points. So I do lean over the total more than anything, but hoping we get a number better than 56, and then maybe I will get involved with it at that point. All right, that'll wrap up the show for the week. Pub Sports Radio's Ian Cameron Sports Report is done for another week. Hope you enjoyed this edition for Friday, October 23rd. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it. We're on 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, right here with the Ian Cameron Sports Report on Pub Sports Radio. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the games and good luck in NFL and college football action. And I will be back with you right here on Monday to recap the weekend that was in NFL and college football. I'll see you again on Monday, October 26th, right here for another edition of the Pub Sports Radio Ian Cameron Sports Report.